This week's topic is promoting, also being booked, talent management, which you have been able to be part of. Let's rewind to the beginning. How did the concept of SixCentz come about, and how did you get involved in promoting freestyle?
I grew up in the projects, Astoria projects, and Latimer project, and I was always throwing parties as a kid. We used to, take the light post and break open the bin, and we used to plug in the DJ equipment. We used to put it out of people's apartments, and we used to have these house parties in the parks all the time. And during those days, we were very into graffiti, very into hip hop, very into freestyle music. During the 80s and 90s, that's all it was. One of the biggest websites around during the graffiti era was a company called SixCentz, and they used to have, everything with graffiti and the elements of hip hop. And I was always a big fan of the music. I was always a big fan of the website. We grew up watching it. When we used to do graffiti on the trains and so forth and vandalize walls, we used to hope that they would post our stuff on that website, especially when that was our 5 minutes of fame. They would interview.
I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So, eventually that grew out. And then, then I started getting involved in hip hop at one point, and I couldn't pack up a place to fill up anything. Every time I used to throw a party, no one would show up. And I was probably like in my early 20s, and I met this young man named Matthew Hall, and he was a kid from Hunter College in the city. And I used to go to his shows, and his shows were packed beyond belief. I used to watch him, and he used to show me how to do it, and we used to throw parties together. And our first party, it was packed, and we made like $3,000 profit. I was like, this is great. But Matthew Hall was the type of kid that would say, okay, we're going to take this $3,000 and donate it towards domestic violence. That's just the type of person he was. We used to have fights over this, all the time, because I used to say, let's spend some of this money, let's reinvest. At one point, we were booking, we had a whole bunch of artists, and we were going around, and we were going to the Zulu Nation 30th anniversary, and we were booking artists for that one show. And as we came out, there was a fight broke out down the block. We were in Harlem, and Matthew he just turned 18 years old. And Matthew's like, well, let's go. And me, I was so curious. I said, well, let's see who's fighting. And everybody ran towards us. Somebody yelled out gun, and he fell to the ground, and he passed away. And ever since then, I said, I'm going to honor him, and we're going to start, doing these shows in his honor. And, we get involved in a lot of different charities and so forth. And eventually, after he passed away, I kind of stepped away from it. A couple years later, I was with a couple of friends of mine. We saw that the SixCentz website was up for auction. I don't know what happened, but I snatched it up really quick. I bought it, and I took it over. My wife, it was her birthday was coming up, and I said, what do you want for your birthday? And she said, I love freestyle music. Okay, no problem. I'm going to book every freestyle artist that you want. We booked all these acts, and I remember Sal Abatello had called me up because I was trying to call Sapphire, and I didn't want to deal with him because I didn't know him. I didn't really trust him.
That's not the first time I heard that.
So I said, no, I'm going to do it myself. And I did it myself, and I booked all these acts, and it cost me a couple of grand. So I said, how am I going to recoup this cost? I said, maybe I'll sell tickets, and my wife should have all the acts there, and I can recoup my money. And I sold out. When I sold out, I looked at everything, and I made like $3,000 or $4,000 profit. I'm like, wow, this is great. I said, let's do it again. This time I tried to book different artists. And when I booked that original show, I booked it through Charlie Rock. And when I tried calling him again to see if I could book another show, he was involved in that award show that he was doing in Miami. So he didn't really have time to talk to me. I was still a little scared to talk to Sal because I heard all these things about him. And I was like, I don't know if I should call him. He's a little pushy, So I called Latif, and I said, and Latif's like, yeah, what do you want to do? I said, listen, I have a $5,000 budget, and I want to book, I want to put together a show. So Latif was like, okay, well, we can do this artist, that artist, and it'll cost you 10 grand. I'm like, well, I told you I have a $5,000 budget. And he goes, all right, so we can do this artist, this artist, this artist, and it'll cost you 12 grand. I'm like, dude, these prices are going up.
The upsell.
I'm telling you, I only have a $5,000 budget. I tried calling Ruben, and I said, hey, I have a $5,000 budget. He goes, how much do you have now? I said, I have $1,000 now. He hung up the phone on me. So I was hesitant. I called up Sal, and I said, Sal, I really want to do this show, and I have a $5,000 budget. And Sal's like, well, how much do you have on you now? So I said, I have maybe $1,500. So he's like, listen, I can give you these acts, Judy Torres and Noel, and it'll cost you like $5,300 or $5,400. I said, that's fine. I said, but I only have $1,500 on me. He's like, Sal's like, give me the $1,500, get the other money together. If you don't come up with the money, I'm just going to keep your $1,500. So I did it. We booked the acts, and we sold out the show, and he was paid on time and accordingly. And it just flowed over from there. Sal and I became close. He loved the fact of how I used to promote. He used to see me at Resorts World handing out flyers, see me in the rain, see me in the cold, handing out flyers. I was constantly getting thrown out of clubs. I would sneak right back in to promote. He saw that I was a hustler. I didn't give up. And it was my money on the line. So I had to do whatever it took to get my money back by selling tickets. And that's one thing that Sal really appreciates, is that he looks for people that actually work for their craft, people that aren't scared, and you'll see me at Radio City Music Hall. I'll have 3 or 4 or 5 guys there, and I'll be out there with them in the rain, in the cold, handing out flyers, selling tickets, talking to them, making deals, drink packages or whatever on the streets. And that's something that Sal and I really appreciated. And then we started, going back and forth, investing in projects together. And that's how him and I got close. And that's how everything started going out of control. And then we attached SixCentz to it just as a way to, for tax purposes and whatnot. And we registered it, and it just worked because we needed a name, and we just put SixCentz together.
You did something that is such a New York thing. You stand outside, you sell tickets, you sell these packages. I mean, I go to 42nd Street, and people are always trying to sell me tickets to a comedy show or check out the strippers or come in for dinner. So you got that same New York mentality. Why is it that people look down on you doing something like that, where you are using the tools that everybody in New York uses, but for freestyle, call it something negative, as you got to sell tickets to be down with fever?
Not necessarily fever. I mean, look, if I'm putting my own shows together, it's my money on the line. I grew up in an old school mentality. My whole business model, I was in the stockbroking business, where, they tied us down to the chairs until we made 1,000 phone calls. I'm a very aggressive person. And even at this point in time, where I have a staff and I have a crew, I'm still out there on the street. As much as social media is great, you have social media, you have online, all these online things that you can do, apps and things that can help you with mailing lists and text messaging lists and everything else like that. It's still great to meet these people and talk to them one-on-one and tell them, hey, listen, I got a great show going on. I have Noel, I have Judy, I have George, I have Kay, I have all these people, come down to the show, and they appreciate that a lot more. Even some of the artists may look at you and say, this guy's a hustler. You see, I'm pushing their name at the end of the day. And, I think the whole thing is pride. A lot of people think that, I don't want to do that, but, you have to get your hands dirty if you want to accomplish a goal. People are scared to do that, and I do it all day, and it works. When you see a show that I'm doing in the city that is packed, the place fits 500 people, and we have 700 people in there, and it works because we had that old school mentality. Don't get me wrong, we're still texting people, we're still sending email blasts and social media blasts, we're still doing all that, but we're still hitting the streets, we're still going to our competitors' shows and venues. We're handing out flyers inside, handing out flyers outside. We're talking to the people that are coming in. If there's a Noel show in Jersey, we're there because we have a Noel show in New York in 3 or 4 weeks. So we try to attract the people that, if you're going there to that show, it's because you like those artists. And we have the same artists in a future show. That's the type of crowd and demographics that you want to go after. And people don't think that. They sit on their computer and they just think that social media is the way to go. But social media is so inundated. There's 1,000 promoters out there trying to post their flyers, and it becomes a blur. But when you talk to someone face to face and you're handing out those flyers, you're talking to them about the show. Hey, I got my own personal tickets here. It's $40 a ticket, but give me 20, and you're wheeling and dealing. And that's something that I've always been into. That's something that I've always liked, and it's always worked for me. And it just works.